I think that Bitcoin itself is likely, based on macro factors, to top sometime towards the end of the year. So that's about November top. And in terms of Bitcoin, top predictions are usually around, I think mine is about 150K by the end of the year. So ETH has been a massive redemption arc, had been on a massive redemption arc since then. And it's now, I think it's definitely going to go above its 5K, the recent 5K high.
코인뷰로의 CEO 닉 퍼크린이 비트코인과 이더리움 그리고 전체 암호화폐 시장에 대한 전망을 이야기했는데요. 지금의 시장은 어디를 향해 나아가고 있는 것인지 그리고 이번 사이클의 끝은 어디일지에 대해 진단했습니다. 그의 깊이 있는 분석 함께 확인해 보시죠.
How are you seeing things play out in terms of Bitcoin's price, Ethereum's price, and the overall crypto majors at this point of this bull run?
So let's dive in right with the markets right now and answer the proverbial question. Is it over or are we so back? Let's start with Bitcoin, right? Literally 2 weeks ago, we had, coming out of the Fed Jackson Hole meeting, we had the markets on fire because of the adjustment in terms of the inflation targeting metrics. And we had the massive rally for Bitcoin and Ethereum breaking through all-time highs. And the markets were euphoric. And then over the weekend, it started to wilter away. And then we had whales dumping on the market dumping Bitcoin to ironically switch into Ethereum, which is interesting. And now it's rolled into this continual whale selling, dumping on the markets has taken Bitcoin lower. And it has kind of taken the market by surprise into September. So August ended as a negative month, unfortunately. And unlike the past history when August has been positive. Now we're rolling into September, right? And September generally has been Bitcoin's worst month historically in terms of performance. It's generally also the September effect is something in TradFi as well. So now we're going into a potentially down September, and it seems as the market is positioned for it to be a down September. It seems the sentiment across CT is down September. And you know how it usually goes when the market thinks one way and the sentiment is one direction, it usually goes the other way, right? The consensus view that doesn't usually play out. I think that in terms of Bitcoin now and its positioning, it comes back to the question around where we are in the cycle. Do you believe in the 4-year cycle? Is the 4-year cycle still driven? Is it still driven by the halving, or are there other factors that may not be playing out right now? And these are all big questions in and of themselves. I think that Bitcoin itself is likely, based on macro factors, to top sometime towards the end of the year. So we're saying probably November, December, which would kind of line up to the longest time frame prior since a halving, which was the last cycle halving. If you believe that the halving drives the cycle, which I don't think so, but let's just assume it does. So that's about November top. And in terms of Bitcoin, top predictions are usually around, I think mine is about 150K by the end of the year. And at that time, generally the view is how crypto markets move is once Bitcoin is topped, people go and look for higher returns down the altcoin spectrum, right into the longer tail of the risk curve down coin market cap rankings. And then the rotation begins. We've already started to see some of that rotation in the alt space, but that's been very localized to Ethereum. And this brings us to Ethereum's performance, which has been a banger over the past 2-3 months, right? It was cast for dead like 4 months ago. Everyone was saying it was the most hated trade. No one wanted to back it. And all of a sudden, Tom Lee and his mates over there in TradFi land decided to CTO Ethereum and saved it from the bottoms. And it literally has had a ripper run. And it's obviously a lot of it has been the digital asset treasury companies, but not just that. Some of the ETF flows have been crazy in terms of they've been even higher than Bitcoin's, not just on a relative basis for market cap weighted, but in a total basis in general, which is crazy. So ETH has been a massive redemption arc, had been on a massive redemption arc since then. And it's now, I think it's definitely going to go above its 5K, the recent 5K high. It was a strong resistance. When that will happen, I think in the next month or two, I think September could be a bit choppy, short of anything happening. We will have to wait to see what happens with the Fed. I think that the consensus is there's going to be a cut, 95 to 99% certain. But the more important question is what happens subsequent to that in terms of what's the monetary policy going to be, how many cuts are we going to get before the end of the year, how dovish is the Fed likely to be, how much influence is Trump going to exert over the Fed. He's already he got 2 board governors resigning, or no, one was fired, one was resigned. He's trying to exert his influence over the Fed. more dovish Fed, more liquidity into the markets. Liquidity obviously drives risk assets, and crypto is one of the most sensitive risk assets. So I expect to see markets sideways chop for September. And then as we roll into the final Q4 of the year, you'll start to see the effects of that liquidity flow into the markets. And once Bitcoin stopped, we all do hope for some sort of an altcoin season after the top in Q4 into next year. But as I've said many times before, I don't think we're going to have the same kind of altcoin season we've seen in previous cycles, this massive altcoin season where all coins rally. It's going to be quite localized in particular niches and sectors and coins. Those that have the best narrative for retail, those that have access through financial products like ETFs, and indeed those who have digital asset treasury companies which could bid those coins.
퍼크린은 비트코인의 정점을 올해 연말 11월에서 12월쯤으로 예상했으며 가격 목표는 약 15만 달러를 제시했습니다. 이어 정점 이후에는 전형적인 흐름처럼 알트코인으로의 자금 이동, 즉 로테이션이 나타날 것이라고 설명했는데요. 특히 이더리움은 기간 매수와 ETF 자금 유입 덕분에 뚜렷한 회복세를 보였고 조만간 5,000달러 돌파 가능성이 높다고 평가했습니다. 그는 또한 연준의 금리 인하와 그에 따른 유동성 확대가 4분기 시장의 핵심 동력이 될 것이라고 강조했습니다. 다만 이번 알트 시즌은 과거처럼 전반적인 상승장이 아니라 내러티브와 접근성이 뚜렷한 일부 섹터 중심으로 국소적으로 진행될 것이라고 주장했습니다. 결국 이번 사이클은 전통적 패턴을 따르는 듯 보이지만 세부적인 전개 방식은 과거와 다른 국면에 들어섰다는 것이 그의 진단이라 볼 수 있습니다. 그리고 혹시 거래 수수료 절반을 다시 환급받는 방법 아직 모르시나요? 단 5분만 투자하면 평생 수수료 돌려받는 셀퍼럴, 선택이 아닌 필수입니다. 자세한 내용은 영상 더보기란을 확인해 보세요.
Firstly, what are your thoughts on Ethereum treasury companies? Because in my mind, Bitcoin is quite purely a monetary protocol. Ethereum is many different things. They're not quite cut from the same cloth and they don't have the same value proposition. Why are these guys buying so much Ethereum, in your opinion?
Well, I think that there's the benefit, obviously, for them as investors. Joe Lubin, at least the guys on the sharpening side, they're Ethereum ecosystem community guys, and they wanted to, and it benefits them in general. Tom Lee is a surprise though, because he's been well known in the past for being a Bitcoin bull, right?
Yep.
Always in Bitcoin, and Bitmine itself is a Bitcoin mining company, which is interesting. That just converted into an ETH max bid-in treasury company. I think for one difference for Ethereum versus Bitcoin if you accumulate in ETH is that you can obviously stake it, so you can get yield from it, right? So there's benefits in that. You can also use the ETH in DeFi protocols and earn yield in other ways. There are interesting strategies you can employ. And I think there's also some, at least on the sharpening side, as opposed to just being a ETH treasury company, just a buying crypto, buying Ethereum. That's the only function. Potential synergies. I mean, they could do stuff with the company itself. The company could potentially consider using some of its cash reserves to either invest in ETH or to also uplift the ecosystem. And some digital asset treasury companies are doing that. So there is a clearer incentive to do this for these ETH treasury companies than just Bitcoin, which is just an asset that is digital gold, right? And that's what it is. And I guess the question also comes down to if Ethereum gets used a lot again, will it ever go into a deflationary asset? Which then obviously, if it's deflationary, it's the worth over a long time period is worth more than just an Bitcoin, which is always going to be inflationary, although it will taper off. So there's those unique use cases and investment theses for Ethereum.
I'm curious, just your thoughts on like this whole sort of narrative about like the 4-year cycle's dead. I think that has come to fruition now. I'm not quite sure when this sort of cycle top comes in. You're a lot better placed than I am to talk about this stuff. I'm not a markets reporter or anything like that. That's not my background, but you come from a TradFi background. So I think you have a much better sort of perspective on this from both a macro perspective and a crypto perspective. But I mean, realistically, in your own thoughts, and I'm sure you speak to a lot of different traders, midway through 2026, end of 2026, when do you see a sort of cycle top before things really retrace from a top in this kind of period?
Well, okay, so I guess the first question is like the 4-year cycle, is it still intact? And that also comes to the questions around what's driving the 4-year cycle. Is it the halving? Is it liquidity flows? Is it just, people chasing Bitcoin thinking it should be the halving, self-reinforcing price action? I think that, look, there's no doubt that the classic 4-year cycle is no more because of the fact that market dynamics have changed. You've got ETFs, you've got DATs, you've got institutions, you've got this massive amounts of liquidity that has now bid in Bitcoin, right? So that has elongated the cycle long. It's going to become longer. Indeed, we're now at about 17 months post-halving. So it's basically a situation where already is quite elongated out. So I think the 4-year cycle, the metronome that we've had for the past since the beginning of Bitcoin is no more, but we still are going to have cycles. We will have a bear market again. These people are out there saying it's a super cycle. We're going into a super cycle. I don't think that, because at the end of the day, if the cycle was driven by something other than the halving, let's say liquidity flows, liquidity expands and contracts. When it contracts again, we go into generally liquidity comes out of the market and Bitcoin sells off. And also, the whole business cycle, I don't think Bitcoin has been through a proper hardcore recession. I mean, there was in the COVID, but that was a manufactured, man-made recession, which lasted for 2-3 months. But a proper hardcore recession, it was born out of a recession in 2008. But what would it do in a proper hardcore recession? So I think that the concept of the 4-year cycle is over. But we will have a bear market. Bitcoin will fall as usually happens in a bear market. In terms of the cycle timing, like I said at the beginning of the stream, I think that we should be targeting end of the year Q1 for Bitcoin, and then potentially, hopefully, have some rotation into alts and breathe some life into them. But then again, it won't be a massive altcoin season that people expect. Like the likes is how it's been.
So 2026 is when the party is over, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, bro. You gotta get ready, man. But time in the markets is the hardest thing ever, right? Because generally, people either hold on too long and then they miss it, or they try to get it. No one can tell you the exact time when it's going to happen. So you can try and have all these ideas in terms of cycle top, but it usually happens slightly earlier before or after that, right?
퍼크린은 이더리움 트레저리 기업들의 매수 움직임을 강조했는데요. 그는 비트코인이 단순히 디지털 금으로서 가치 저장 수단에 머무는 반면 이더리움은 스테이킹을 통한 이자 수익, 디파이 활용, 기업 생태계와의 시너지 등 다양한 투자 논리를 갖고 있다고 설명했습니다. 특히 이더리움은 거래가 활발해질수록 네트워크 수수료, 즉 가스비가 소각돼 공급량이 줄어들 수 있는데, 이렇게 유통량이 점점 감소하는 자산을 디플레이션 자산이라고 부릅니다. 만약 이런 흐름이 강화된다면 인플레이션 구조를 지닌 비트코인보다 장기적으로 더 높은 가치를 인정받을 수 있다는 분석입니다. 또한 그는 전통적으로 알려진 4년 주기는 사실상 끝났다고 진단했는데요. ETF, 기관자금, 디지털 자산 트레저리 등 새로운 자금 유입 요인들로 인해 사이클은 과거보다 길어졌고 단순히 반감기에 의존하지 않는다는 겁니다. 그러나 사이클 자체가 사라진 것은 아니며 여전히 정점과 약세장은 찾아올 것이라고 전망했습니다. 결국 이번 사이클은 과거와는 다른 양상으로 전개되고 있지만 그만큼 새로운 기회가 열리고 있다는 뜻이기도 할 텐데요. 앞으로 펼쳐질 시장의 변화를 잘 준비한다면 더 큰 성장의 순간을 잡을 수 있을 것으로 생각됩니다. 오늘 영상 도움이 되셨다면 구독, 좋아요 부탁드립니다. 감사합니다.